Hey, it's Finance Friday again. I want to talk to you about my study, which I just started again because I've read this book before, of America's First Billionaire. And I'm excited to dive into this. This is the story of Andrew Carnegie. If you've not read his biography, if you've not read his book, Gospel of Wealth, that's what we're covering on Finance Friday, probably for the next chunk of time. Stay tuned. Hey, Jerry Fetta here, CEO of Wealth. It's great to be back for another Finance Friday. So I'm opening up and reading the Gospel of Wealth and also the autobiography of Andrew Carnegie. I just finished, Mark Twain's book, The Financial Misadventures of Mark Twain, really how not to invest, how not to build wealth. And so I thought it would be a nice contrast to now move over to, okay, so what's like the ideal way to do it? Right? So for those of you that don't know, Andrew Carnegie is America's first billionaire, arguably the richest man in the history of the United States. Up until recently, I think Elon finally beat him and possibly John Rockefeller. But before that, Rockefeller and Carnegie had gone back and forth as far as being the highest net worth, right? And Carnegie was interesting because he was, a first generation immigrant. And so the book starts out with his background of living in Scotland. Right? So he's not even in the US at this point. He's in Scotland. And so it goes into like some of his childhood, some of the things that influenced him early on. And, really that was something that as I was reading just the very first part of it, it really showed me like how someone comes up in an environment like that really does impact how they are when they get money. Next, I don't want to interrupt you too long. I just want to give you a free offer for my book, The Blueprint to Financial Freedom. If you go to jerryfetta.com/B2F promo, you can get the book now. I'm going to let you get back to the video. Right? And there's this myth out there that money changes you and it can make you this bad, evil person and it could make you an asshole and all this kind of stuff. And so you can see Carnegie was raised well. Right? He had a good mother. He had grandparents that cared about him. He had aunts and uncles. He had family. He had childhood friends. And so he grew up in this community where he really did have community. Like he really did have people around him that cared about him, that knew about his family. They knew his granddad. They knew his dad. And so it was one of these types of environments where you kind of flourish as a kid there. Right? So he gets into this in the early book, and that was one of the things that stuck out to me is, okay, the quality of how he was raised definitely had some impact on who he is today. Now you have to keep in mind, in Scotland at the time, they still had royalty, right? This was back in the 1800s. They still had kings and barons and all this kind of stuff. And so Carnegie actually talks about like one of the things he had to rewire himself on mentally was his acceptance of people who had financial stature. And it was because of the fact that you would have these people that, were just luckily born into the right gene pool. And all of a sudden they're like a prince or a baron or something very important. And it's like he could spot as a kid. He's like, all you did is you were born, right? You did zip to earn that. There's not something you can repeat. There was no skill there. So he didn't like that. He's like, it's really just the fact that they got lucky. Like their parents are actually good people of good stature and they just happened to be born that way. And I thought it was really opposite with him, right? It was interesting because he didn't like this idea of, okay, mom and dad are rich and powerful and wealthy and well-known and you're born into that family and all of a sudden you get all of that. And he was born into the opposite, yet he became that. Right? His parents weren't wealthy. They weren't rich. They didn't have all this stature and stuff. And so they were good people and they had good repute in their community, but they weren't known as these wealthy, powerful, royal, societal figures. And so Carnegie comes into that kind of born at the very bottom, not even in the United States. And I want to just point this out because I love the United States. Obviously, I'm an American, right? I choose to live here and I was born here and I could live other places and I choose not to, and that's for a reason. In the 1800s, it really meant something to not be born in America, right? Like I want you to think about like some of these countries still had kings. Some of these countries still had, dictator systems. They still had the royal families. They still had all of this stuff that we'd come out of, right? We were like the first real free country out there. And so in the first chapter of the book, I thought it was tremendous to see the viewpoint because this is like, today, I think we have it too easy. we have it so easy that people complain about living in America. They complain about being here. It's like, oh, this and that's wrong with it, and this isn't perfect. And it's like, when you get to that level, you're just spoiled. You're literally just spoiled. It doesn't matter what political party you are, you're just bitching. You're spoiled. You have too many things given to you. You don't know what it's like to not have the stuff. And so Carnegie lived in Scotland, and so he talks about how his family, they really looked to the Republic of the United States as something to idealize. Like they were like, that's the dream. What they're doing is the dream. And so they were, there's rebellions going on. His family was involved in those. And I thought it was so interesting to see, like, one of the reasons I think he did so well, we'll find out later in the book, is he finally made it here. Right? Imagine like growing up somewhere where the opportunity was like, if you weren't born in the right bloodline, you were pretty much going to amount to nothing. And you go to a country where it's like, hey, anyone can make it here. And that's still true today. Anyone can make it here. Right? I have a friend of mine who 14 years ago moved here, didn't speak a word of English, and now he's a multimillionaire. Right? Anyone can make it here. And it was true back then, and they saw it. So I think when he finally came here, and we'll find out again, as I mentioned, but I think when he did, and he finally got to the United States, he was probably like, just like, take the bull out of the pen and let me go. Right? And I think that is an element that is lost, is looking at your environment that you're in and seeing, okay, where's the opportunity? And apparently for some reason in Scotland, they didn't see that. They moved to the United States for a reason. And when he got here, he looked at all of the opportunities, all of the things he could be doing, all of the, business ventures and investing and all the stuff he ended up doing in his life. And so that's all kind of tied in. You can see all of this tying in this first chapter and starting to emerge even as a child. Now, the other point I'm going to mention before I wrap up on today's video, he mentions the romance of growing up in Scotland, right? So for all the things he was criticizing and, obviously he moved to the United States, he's like, when you grow up and you have like this romance of, there's castles and there's these famous historical figures that are buried right down the road from your house, and you've got this whole environment that's been created and idealized and dreamed up. And it's like, even today, it's kind of the stuff of fairy tales, right? He mentioned that as a kid, having that experience, when he finally became an adult, those were things that kept him imaginative, that made him continue dreaming. Because no matter how bleak or difficult it got, those moments would resurface where he was like, I grew up looking at castles. Like, you can't help but have that influence the level of enthusiasm and imagination that you have as an adult. Hey, what's up? Jerry here. I just wanted to give you another reminder. Grab my book, Blueprint to Financial Freedom. It's going to be one of the best books you have ever read on finance. I can promise you that. You're going to love it. It's also a free offer. So if you go to jerryfetta.com/B2F promo, you can get that now. And I can relate to that. I didn't grow up with castles, but I grew up, with quite a bit of freedom as far as living like in Alaska with woods, Montana. We had woods there, mountains. And it's like the way that you have your childhood as far as the environment, the surroundings, being able to use the imagination, being able to run free, all this kind of stuff, which I feel like is dying off today a bit. I think that serves you as an adult. That spirit of play never really leaves you. So if you grew up without it, where you're like, I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in the city, and for me, exciting means walking the dog in our little fake grass yard where all the other dogs are being walked, I don't think you get the same level of excitement and romance influencing you as a kid following you into adulthood. I just don't, right? And so these are some elements I can see, and I can actually relate to them. I think what I can relate to so far in the book is, different than the Mark Twain thing, because Mark Twain, I grew up poor as well. My parents weren't like maniacally trying to get rich, neither was I. So the sum of that where I was like, okay, I can see that, or maybe I saw people like that. But I can relate to Andrew Carnegie because I can look at this and be like, okay, I grew up relatively, like maybe not exactly the same, but relatively similarly in the community like he did, right? Where we had, school and we had church and my parents had friends and they knew my mom and dad and they knew me, and there was kind of this community vibe going on. Right? Or having the freedom to be a kid and to roam around. And, for me, like, even though we didn't have kings and queens when I'm growing up here in the United States in the 1990s, nobody in my family was wealthy. I didn't know anyone that was wealthy. So I kind of had a similar attitude where I was like, you must just luckily get born into it somehow. Like, how do people end up that way? It didn't occur to me that I could build it. It wasn't something where I was like, there's a pathway and I can learn it and I can do these things and I can end up there too. So it was one of those things for me as well where it was frustrating because I was like, man, you must just be born into the right family and that's it. And if you're not, you're not, and you're just going to live this mediocre, mundane existence the rest of your life. So that's my feedback so far on Gospel of Wealth. I've read this before. I love Andrew Carnegie's story. So I'm really excited to get more into it with you. If you don't have the book, I recommend you get it. It's not something I make money on recommending or anything like that. It's just worth you reading it, understanding it, and opening your mind as to what it really means to be wealthy. Because I think he was a great example of, looking at wealth as a sacred trust for society, bettering the planet, bettering humankind. That's what we're about at Philanthro Wealth. That's what we want you to be about too. That's why I think you should read the book. Thanks for watching. I hope this was valuable. Drop your comments and questions below. Like, subscribe, share. I'll see you next time. Hey, this is Jerry Fetta here. I want to thank you for watching my video, watching my content. I hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to learn more about the blueprint to financial freedom and how you can achieve passive income that exceeds your savings, your expenses, your taxes, your generosity, and build wealth like the top 1%, I want to encourage you, grab a copy of my book, The Blueprint to Financial Freedom. You can go to jerryfetta.com/B2F promo, or you can click the link in the description of the video here. The copy is free. You cover your shipping. We'll send the book out to you, and we'll send you an email with a bunch of great bonus material also for free. Get the book, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you on my next content.